Jessica Tarlov, Donald Trump's least favorite liberal Fox News commentator and our personal favorite, once again fact-checked her MAGA co-host relentlessly, defended Kamala Harris's appearance on the Fox Propaganda Network, and generally humiliated Donald Trump in the most recent episode of The Five. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video. We're going to start with Jessica Tarlov defending Kamala Harris's recent appearance on Fox, being interviewed by Bret Baier. I think she makes a pretty compelling case for why this was the right call by the vice president and why she did a pretty good job and succeeded in her mission.
What's her name? I got to go to her next. Jessica, I mean, the goal for Kamala Harris yesterday, what was it and did she reach it?
So the goal was to not satisfy anyone sitting on this panel. Partisans, people who generally know how they're going to vote, have their preferences. If there are any undecideds left, and I'm getting skeptical that there are many of them with 19 days to go, 18 days to go, or whatever, and maybe it's just between Kamala and the couch or Trump and the couch, I think she did accomplish that goal. Because those people, if they're voting on immigration, I could guess how they're voting. If they're voting on reproductive freedom, I know how they're voting. And what Kamala Harris needed to do was to show up, to look tough, to not get rattled. I would disagree with my very generous colleague who brought me a gift today about her looking presidential. I think she handled herself really well, and she looked like the prosecutor who has won a lot of elections in the past, statewide elections, and had a very successful career. I think that she did particularly well in prosecuting the case against Donald Trump's character. When she discussed the enemy within comments that he made on Maria Bartiromo's show and then struggled to clean up, or actually just refused to clean up when he was talking to Harris in the town hall. And clearly they have message tested unstable, unfit, lacks the competency to do the job and the character. And that's where she is leading by really sizable proportions. So 7 million people saw her last night. If even a fraction of them were looking to feel confident that she could do the job, I think they would walk away from that saying that she can.
Excellent defense of the vice president's appearance, because it was very high risks going into enemy territory like that, knowing that, Fox was going to have gotcha questions lined up. As we've discussed in previous videos, Bret Baier had gotcha questions lined up, and he basically led with them. Whereas in previous interviews, like with Donald Trump, for instance, Bret Baier tended to warm his subject up, right? He tended to, ask, I don't say softball questions, but much less adversarial questions before getting to the adversarial stuff. But right out the gate, Bret Baier had a mission, which was to humiliate Vice President Harris. Then, of course, it backfired when she exposed, basically he fell into his own gotcha. He fell into his own trap, and she exposed him for it. And it went so badly for Bret Baier that, as I mentioned in a previous video, the next day he, apropos of nothing on his own show, Special Report, admitted that he screwed up. So 1 point rather for Vice President Harris, Bret Baier, 0 points. So again, great defense by Jessica Tarlov. It is important to remember that, this election is going to be determined by just probably tens of thousands of currently undecided voters, right, in a handful of swing states. And so the vice president has to make risky gambles to try to separate herself from Donald Trump. And we'll see what happens. But at the end of the day, after having watched the interview, I would say she lost nothing. I can't imagine people walking away from that interview saying, I was thinking about voting for Harris and now I'm less interested. If anything, I would suspect people would be more interested than not, even if it didn't move the needle all that much in the aggregate. So got some other clips to play, including, I believe in this one, Jessica Tarlov fact-checking her MAGA co-host, because they recently discussed that there was an upward revision in the crime rate for 2022. In other words, we have since learned from the FBI that crime rose in 2022 rather than declined. And so Jessica Tarlov makes a point to fact check some of her co-hosts as they try to insinuate that crime in general during the Biden administration, not just 2022, but all years, spiked.
That hideous gift of the Real Clear Politics average in the battlegrounds, though. Okay, so time to play my favorite game. You cherry picked. Okay, so what you didn't mention is that there was a downward revision in the level of violent crime in 2021 that was actually a bigger ratio than the upward revision in 2022. And 2021 and 2023 are actually lowest crime rates, violent crime rates that we've seen in decades.
Right.
I would also note that the homicide rate, which is pretty important, right? People getting murdered, that's unambiguously down, and you can check CDC stats against that as well. So David Muir has no apologies to give about
yes,
this.
He does. Because
he doesn't.
No, because
but
still the underlying issue of the FBI stats
Can
is that they didn't include
true.
major cities. Yes, it is.
So again, great important fact check from Jessica Tarlov on this. I will also point that the 2023 stats included both the new data streams, the old data streams, and coverage that covered 94% of the American population. That's how thorough. It's the most thorough it's been in years. Obviously, you want to get it to 100%, not just 94, but pretty damn good, all things considered. And we saw a dramatic decrease in 2023, according to recent FBI reports. Now, one other fact check or observation made by Jessica Tarlov about Donald Trump that many people didn't note during his Univision town hall, in which he humiliated himself and probably lost votes when he gave his response to January 6th. But it was a certain pronoun that Trump used during the course of the conversation. Let's see if you catch it.
He calls January 6th now a day of love. We have moved from, we should move on from January 6th to this was a day of love. And what I found perhaps the most interesting was that he kept saying we to encompass him and the insurrectionists. So now he's on that team.
They're not insurrectionists.
The tourists. The tourists with zip ties. He says we, and he's now called them hostages, which is a very strange...
Keep playing the Jan 6 card.
Okay, I will. But this came from someone who had supported him. This isn't about Jessica Tarlov hates Donald Trump. He calls...
So, again, that is an interesting observation that during the Univision town hall, when he is referring to the January 6th rioters and insurrectionists, Trump used the pronoun we, as in he's including himself in the insurrectionist side, the insurrectionist faction, which makes sense given that they were his cultish mob that he primed with lies, with baseless lies about the 2020 election being stolen. And then he sat in his orange ass and watched them invade the Capitol for 3 hours, despite having all the authority and responsibility in the world to quell that insurrection. So that seemed to be a tacit admission on his part that he was one of them and they were acting at his behest. Of course, when he referred to January 6th as a day of love, that moment went viral because Ramiro Gonzalez, the former Republican Trump supporter, who asked the question and told Trump that he was giving him the opportunity to earn back his vote. As soon as Trump referred to it as a day of love, Gonzalez reacted with visible disgust, which is also helping create the viral moment. So again, it was a disastrous performance at Univision by Trump. Contrast that with a pretty good performance, all things considered, by Harris at Fox. And the two candidates could not be better juxtaposed. So great analysis by Jessica Tarlov. Again, Donald Trump's least favorite Fox News liberal. He's been calling her out directly by name in one Truth Social rant after another. She should print them out and frame them, knowing that she has triggered him so utterly. I know I would. But another great performance by her, handing out the fact checks to a MAGA panel that doesn't want to hear it and to a Fox News audience who probably never would hear it if not for her. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.